Today we're going to talk about 3 drills to help you throw harder that I guarantee you haven't heard about before. My name is Jesse Lapiana. I'm a certified strength and conditioning coach, former baseball player, and former strength and conditioning coach for the Boston Red Sox organization. Now, there are countless drills on YouTube that claim to help you throw harder, and most of them involve things with the throwing arm. In later videos, I will get to what to do to strengthen the arm, but for today, we're going to be talking about the lower body. The lower body is really the thing that generates most of the power in the throwing motion. If you don't believe me, try throwing a ball from your knees. When you compare the two, you clearly see that you can throw the ball further from a standing position versus a kneeling position. So if we want to throw harder, we have to address what's happening down below, and that's what we're going to do today. So we've all heard coaches tell us to get into our legs, right? Drive from your back leg, get into your back leg, but most coaches don't really tell you how to do that. They've never really explained the true mechanisms of how to load the hip, the leg, the knee, and even the foot, right? Those are the 4 parts of the leg. You have the hip, you have the leg, you have the knee, and you have the foot. So if we want to understand how to throw harder, we must understand how to improve our ability to load our back leg and then even load our lead leg. So today we're going to be talking about 3 main drills that are going to help you improve your ability to load your lower body. So the first drill that I'm going to recommend is actually a mobility drill. If you can't get into your hips, if you don't have the mobility to get into the deepest regions of your hip capsule, then no amount of lowering down or squatting into your hips is going to really be effective. You actually have to have the range of motion first, and then you have to use the range of motion once you've opened up the space. So this is really one of the more effective drills at opening up your ability to load your hips. It's called the adductor pullback, and here we go.
What we're going to do is we're going to wrap a band around some sort of post and allow for you to create some resistance with the band. You're going to wrap the band behind the knee. And you're going to create a little bit of tension with the band here to start out with. And I'm going to create a 90-degree angle with my knees and a perpendicular angle with my torso. So 90-degree angle, legs, and 90-degree angle with hips and upper body. From here, I can let this hand either go under my head or out in front, and then this other hand pushes down into the ground. I'll create a little bit of a pillow for my head. And I'm going to just find this tuck. But then the initial movement that I'm going to find is this reach, okay? So this is the first one that I want us to understand. Allow for the band to pull this knee forward. And we can clearly see that this knee is ahead of the bottom one. What this does is this creates a pullback of the down leg. So right now I have a reach of the top leg and a pullback of the bottom leg. And the bottom leg, I can start to feel my inner thigh. So what's going to occur in the pullback and reach mechanism is an engagement of the muscles associated with these movements, and these are going to be the inner thigh muscles. And I'm just going to work on breathing in this position and really feel this whole kind of line of pull in my back, in my hips, in my inner thigh. Try to do it without cramping, and the way that you'll be able to avoid that cramping sensation is just to put yourself in more of this flexion by exhaling and by tucking your butt, pushing this hand down. So that's the reach, okay? Now, the opposite of that is going to be the pullback. So what I'm going to start to do is I'm going to start to drive this hip back, try and do it without the shoulders, but initially you can kind of have the shoulders help out a little bit just to understand how to get it, and then try and maintain it, push these knees down into one another, and then close the shoulders off. So now I have the inner thigh of the top leg. So through the pullback, the top leg, I can engage the muscles in this top leg, tucking, exhaling, feeling the sensation mildly in the outer hip along with the inner thigh. And you can kind of just floss between one another, stretching the other one out a little bit more, maybe sensing that you gain a little bit more from the top leg pullback, and then maybe going for a little bit of a deeper pullback here with an exhale. Tucking, trying to find a little bit of the hamstrings and the inner thigh.
Okay, so once we have opened up the space for you to actually drive back into the hip. Now, most of you don't even realize that you have the ability to do this, right? So for perspective shifting sake, you need to understand that your hips can do the same thing as your shoulders. They're both ball and socket joints, so your shoulders can protract and retract, right? Retracting is how you get load into the shoulders, and protracting is how you push load out of the shoulders. The hips can do the exact same things. Nobody's teaching this out there, but I am. So I'm here to tell you that you need to take advantage of this movement during your throwing motion, your hitting motion, right? You need to learn how to authentically shift weight into your hips and out of your hips. And the way to do that is not only just sinking down into the hip, but actually taking it back in space so that you can take it forward in space and then over towards the direction that you can, right? So the next drill that we're going to get into is understanding how you do this from a standing position. And when you're standing, you obviously have the foot on the ground. So you have to start to consider how to do this motion from the foot, orchestrate things from the foot, right? That's the only thing that's touching the ground. So in this next drill, you're going to see a band pull you out of the position, and then you have to use your foot in order to get into the position.
Like for the band to pull us into the loaded position, let's feel what the band is like pulling us out of the position and us forcing our way into it against the band. So the way that we would do that is I'm going to take this right arm grab again, and then I'm going to notice what it does to my lead foot now. And immediately I can feel that the weight, if I were to lift up this leg. So if I'm starting normal, that's what my body wants to do if I don't have it, if I just let it win. So again, wants to get my chest and therefore my hips facing the fence. And this hip is all the way open. In fact, this other hip, I can get it behind it and really force it in front. So now the question begins, how do I get back into that starting stance? Well, the answer to that is by, again, just rotating.
So notice from this position how far the hip is out of the load, right? So if the loaded hip is back, that means the unloaded hip is forward. So this, I'm a righty, so my back leg would be my right leg. So the band is pulling you out of the position. So now you're going to recruit the muscles of the hip from the foot in order to get the hip to drive back.
From the inside part of the foot. So I have to find this inward motion to counteract this outward motion, this clockwise. Sorry, this would be counterclockwise. So the band is pulling my foot counterclockwise. I actually need to pull onto the ground in this clockwise position. The only way my body knows how to do it is by driving to the inside part of my foot first and then pulling my body around into the position. So right now I have all of the inside part of my foot. Put this wedge here to really challenge my ability to do it. If you stay the inside part of that foot, you'll be able to find this balance position where you can go ahead and start to squat down and start to hinge over, even lifting up this leg entirely and not going anywhere. These hips are shifted. I can even step this foot forward and lift this leg, right? Pitching motion. So I want to practice getting in and out of it. Going back.
Right, really important to be lazy with the arm, right? Try to really focus on orchestrating this whole movement from your foot. So now we're going to go into the lead leg. What does the lead leg need to do in order to load and unload?
Other side.
So obviously step one is getting weight into the back hip from the back foot. But after you've pushed weight off of the back leg and back foot, you have to push weight somewhere. And the best way to be accurate, the best way to have a repeatable sequence is to land in the exact same part of your hip and the same part of your foot each time, right? If you can land balanced, if you can load balanced, it's gonna be repeatable. So now you're doing the complete opposite with the lead leg, right? The band is pulling you out of it and now you're pulling into it. So that last drill is really teaching you how to load into the hip, right? What do you need to do from the foot and the hip in order to load against the band, right? The band is pulling you out of the position. You need to recruit muscles in order to pull into the position. This next drill is going to teach you how to push out of the position. The band is now going to pull you into the part of your hip, and then you're going to push out of the position using your foot, using your knee, and using your hip.
and grab the band with the lead arm, and you're gonna just allow the band to turn your entire body towards the fence without your foot moving. So my foot is still facing the camera, but my body, my hips, my belly button, and my right foot are both facing the fence. And what I'm gonna do here is I'm just gonna allow for it to happen. I can even lift up this foot entirely. I wanna start to breathe into this twisted position, bending side to side, and then playing around with moving my pelvis underneath me, forward and back, practicing exhaling. And then what I wanna start doing is understanding how one would get out of this position. So one would get out of this position by pushing down on the inside part of my foot. So now that I have the inside part of my foot, I'm somewhere in between. I'm not continuing to go. If I let go of the inside part of my foot, my body continues to move towards the fence. But as soon as I push, I grab a hold of the inside part of my foot. In fact, I'm gonna put something underneath my inside part of my foot. I have this wedge here. So placing this wedge, placing the wedge underneath the inside part of my foot and even forcing myself off my inside part of my foot even more, I can now really strive to find a piece of it. This actually makes it a lot more difficult. But the goal here is to understand what the inside part of the foot is, start to use it to get out of the position. So what you'll notice here, if I take this away and now I just recognize that all I need to do is go towards the inside part of my foot, push into it, and then I start to feel this motion towards the other side. Now I have my belly button and my hips facing the camera, while my shoulders are still kind of facing this direction. So again, to get all the way towards this, I have to really bend down.
So then the opposite would be true for the opposite leg, right? You would just, if you're a lefty, you would practice pushing off of your back leg, left leg. So righty, lefty, obviously you should probably do this to stay symmetrical on both sides. But now I'm going to summarize those two videos so you guys understand. So to summarize what we just learned about the foot and the hip, if we're talking about a righty and we're breaking things into two parts of the sequence, you have the load and then you have the unload, right? You're loading and then you're throwing. The back hip is going into retraction and flexion, right? You're driving down into the hip and also back. And then that back foot is doing a counterclockwise, that right foot is doing a counterclockwise motion. Otherwise, we can call it internal rotation in order to drive that hip back, right? That's what that foot needs to do. The lead hip is going to do the opposite of the back hip, protraction and extension. And then the lead foot is also doing the opposite. In order to push weight off of it, the lead foot is actually doing the same thing as the back foot, right? Counterclockwise for the right foot is going to load the right hip, but counterclockwise for the left foot is going to unload the foot and unload the hip. So that would be external rotation for the lead foot and internal rotation for the back foot. Now the unload, the throwing of the ball, would be initiated by protraction and retraction, protraction and extension of the back hip, which would be initiated by a clockwise or external rotation of the back foot. That would drive that hip forward and out of this hip socket. And then the lead hip is going to then accept the load in retraction and in flexion. And that lead foot is also going to be doing a clockwise motion. So you're going to be doing an external or a clockwise with the back foot, but at the same time, I'm going to be accepting load on that lead foot into the hip socket. So this strategy of tracking body parts can be expanded into tracking all of the body parts that are involved in the throwing motion, right? The 17 of them: torso, shoulder, arms, ribs, hands, hips, legs, knees, and feet. And then you can just track them from beginning, middle, and end. But you specifically have to use a very specific terminology that 99% of coaches don't really have the ability to speak. And that's why most coaches are talking, twisting and turning and then, squishing bugs. But in all reality, all of these movements that are used in sport have specific names. And if you can start to become fluent in this language, you can start to actually understand things at a greater level and start to get your body to do things more effectively, more efficiently. I've also created this sheet to really track, what professional pitchers do. And we can see that using this terminology, tracking each body part, you can really get a much, much better understanding of how to produce power and how to actually mirror what these professional pitchers are doing. So most kids don't have this terminology. They can't speak it. And so what I've done in my community is I am teaching this terminology. I am giving each athlete an opportunity to learn the names of the movements that each body part can do, right? So for example, the torso can rotate, it can flex, it can extend. The shoulders can protract, they can retract, right? So each body part has its own set of movements that it can do, and then athletes are simply using them at different parts of the sequence. But unless you speak this language, it's always going to be a mystery of what these people do. So not only do we have our biomechanics strategies that we use the same strategy for hitting and running, but we also have mobility training, flexibility training, strength, power, endurance, nutrition, right? All really scientifically and methodical strategies found inside of this community. If you need further help, if you need more hand-holding and you can't go through these things on your own, we have a mentorship program that I'll also leave a link down below in the description. So if you like this video, please like and subscribe and ring the bell to get notified every single time we release a new video. I will see you guys in the next video.